Hi guys, welcome to the Career Sprints YouTube channel. My name is Rohit and we create videos that help you with your project management career. Now in this video, I want to talk about important terms, models and concepts that you must know for your PMP certification exam. Knowing these terms and concepts will help you get quite a few questions correct in the exam. Now these concepts and terms were recently covered in our PMP virtual class which we conduct 2 to 3 times a month. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to our channel and giving this video a like. So without wasting any time, let's dive in and look at these terms and concepts. But let's start with getting to understand some important terms and concepts for the exam. Now, before I dive into this, what I want you to understand is that what we're going to discuss in the next couple of slides or in the next 40-45 minutes is we're going to talk about conflict management. So we are going to talk about some concepts from what a conflict is and how conflicts are managed. And then we are also going to talk about some terms that are related to people's behaviors. So we are going to talk about that. So a huge focus of this class is going to be on models or methods or ways to manage a conflict. And the other element, would be related to how people would kind of behave in some specific situations that they are in, right? For example, scheduling related behaviors that people have. So let's start with conflict management. So let's first understand what is the meaning of conflict. So in general, right, if you read the definition of a conflict, it says conflict is a disagreement between individuals that can vary from mild dissent to an emotion packed with win-lose confrontation. Conflict is inevitable in project teams involving more than one person, and the ability to manage conflict is considered as a core leadership competence. So first of all, let's understand what conflict is and where does it come from. So conflict can come from many different sources and it can have many different reasons. For example, one reason for conflict could be an ego clash between two people, right? Because of the personality type that they have. Another reason for a conflict could be that people do not agree with the project's priorities. Somebody feels that something else should be a priority, whereas another person feels that some other part of the project should be given a higher priority. So when project priorities do not match, that is also a reason for conflict. Another reason for conflict could be when people do not agree on the use of resources within the team. So there could be a specific resource that may be required on two projects at the same time. And people, the leaders of the project or the project managers could get into a conflict with each other about who should be getting that resource. So there could be technical reasons for conflict management. There could be personality reasons. There could be schedule related reasons. There could be project cost related reasons. We are going to look at different sources, but all of these could become causes for a conflict. And what is typically a conflict? A conflict could be, like it says, having a mild dissent. So I may not agree with you on something. And, that initial disagreement that you and I may have could reach a point where I am not able to stand looking at you. And the same applies to you. So, it may reach a point where two people literally start disliking each other, and they don't even want to confront or be in front of each other at all, right? So there are different stages of conflict as well, which we are also going to look at as part of this class, right? So one of the things to understand about conflict is that conflict can be good and conflict can also be bad, right? So conflict is not always necessarily bad. Many people may feel that, having a conflict is a bad thing, right? It is unhealthy, or it causes stress, and so on and so forth. So conflict can be divided into good conflict and bad conflict. Now, what is good conflict? Good conflict is basically conflict where maybe, let's say, if you and I have a disagreement, right, and we are having a debate about something that we disagree on, we may still land up exchanging ideas.
we may land up, for example, you may land up giving me a perspective that I was not able to see before. Or the other thing could be that, both of us may come to a middle ground, and we may try to collaborate, and we may try to solve that particular conflict as well, right? So for example, if we value our relationship with each other, we are going to make attempts to see how that disagreement can be resolved, and how can we come together and kind of come to an agreement, right? So good conflict will normally produce ideas, it will solve problems, it will give people an opportunity to assimilate different perspectives. It will also enable you to become more creative, collaborative, and it in turn can improve the overall team's performance, right? So this is a conflict which results in a healthy state for the team or for the individuals involved. Next is bad conflict. What is bad conflict? Bad conflict is just bad energy, toxicity, reduced productivity, people hiding issues under the rug, like they're just sweeping any project issues under the rug. That is a bad thing. That should not happen in a team, because when people start avoiding a conflict, when people start only thinking about their own self-interest, when people start getting into destructive kind of behaviors, then it is bad for the team. It is bad for the team's goal, and it is in turn bad for the organization. So in the PMP exam, if you do get a question on conflict management, right, remember that, any of these, any statement which would tend towards saying, maybe fire a team member, or, hide things from management, or hide things from the project manager or from the rest of the team, these are generally going to be bad answers, and they should not be chosen as the correct answer, right? So there is good conflict which promotes good behavior, so healthy debate and good behavior, and then there is bad conflict which results in toxicity and a host of other issues that can crop up later on in the project. Right? So this is the essential difference. Next is warranted conflict and unwarranted conflict, right? Now let's understand what does this mean. So warranted conflict basically means that when there is a conflict due to team members not agreeing with the stated goal of the project. So for instance, maybe you thought that you should not have been involved in the project in the first place, right? So basically, whatever is the vision of the company that they are trying to accomplish, whatever is the goal that the company is trying to accomplish, you were never in alignment with the vision. You never really agreed to the vision of the organization. So you were not in agreement with the stated goal, right? So if you see, there's an example given. It says we should have never been involved in the project. So that is warranted conflict. This normally happens when senior leaders, or when company executives, when they are unable to explain what the vision of the project is, when they are unable to get buy-in from the people who are there on the team, right? So if you're not able to convince them, you're not able to get buy-in, that could cause warranted conflict. Next is unwarranted conflict. Unwarranted conflict is that you do agree with the goal of the project, but you maybe not agree with how the project should be carried out. So maybe you're thinking that a work breakdown structure should be used in the project, but someone else says no, maybe we should not be using that. Maybe you feel that that project components should be integrated before the testing is done, and not that first you do testing and then you do the integration. So this is when team members disagree about how to go about, let's say, the technical implementations of the project, or anything related to resource management. All of these elements would qualify under unwarranted conflict, right? So most of the conflicts in the team are unwarranted conflict, because if you are normally putting together a project team, you are definitely trying to get in buy-in from them. And although you may have buy-in from them, you may not have buy-in from them in terms of how the project should be implemented. So whenever there's an issue with how the project should be implemented, what the priority should be, and so on and so forth, that would qualify as unwarranted conflict. Okay. So just understand what the definition of conflict is, what is good, bad conflict, what is warranted, unwarranted conflict. Now let's talk about sources of conflict, right? So whenever a conflict happens between people, there could be multiple reasons why the conflict would happen, right? Now, these are some major or common reasons that have been identified when it comes to sources of conflict. So if you see, they go from least common to most common, right? So this is a pyramid that shows you what are the least common reasons for the conflict and what are the most common reasons for the conflict. So let's go over all of them, right? So first is personalities. Now, personality could be ego clashes, it could be interpersonal differences. Maybe I just don't like someone, the way they behave or the way they act, or someone's personality may put you off. So that could be one of the reasons for personality related conflicts, which, as you can see on the scale, it is the least common. Then there are project cost related conflicts. So project cost related conflict could be things like cost estimates, right? So maybe you don't agree with the estimates that have been that have been determined for the project, right? Maybe not enough time was spent doing estimation, right? Maybe not enough research was done to gather project data so that you're able to come up with a proper estimate. So that could also be a reason for a conflict. Next is administrative policies and procedures, right? Then it says project managers reporting relationships, interface relationships, scope, operational requirements. So these are also some reasons for conflict, right? So this could be, for instance, who should be reporting to whom, right? Which team should be interfacing with which other team? What would be the operational needs of the project, right? So if there is a disagreement on these areas, right, then this can also result in a conflict. Next is technical beliefs. So technical beliefs could be, for example, how should the project be implemented technically? What should be the architecture of the project? How should a specific area or a technical implementation of a project, how should that be addressed? What are the technical trade-offs that we should be making? What are the means to achieve high performance? So for example, for an agile team, this could be the definition of done. So if you do have an understanding of agile, you would know that agile teams normally create a definition of done that enables them to check whether the increment has been produced to stated quality criteria. So there could be some disagreements around what should the definition of done be, for instance, right? So that would be a technical belief, right? And that is also a reason for conflict. Next is resources. So resources could be, which person or which team member is needed for what work in the project. So staffing of project team members, getting staff from different departments, who should be supporting the project and who should not be supporting the project. Basically, when you're facing issues trying to obtain resources, that would be a reason for resource related conflict. Okay. So that's another reason. Then you have priorities. So these are priorities related to project tasks or project features or project sequencing of activities. So normally, a product owner in an agile team, they have to work with many different stakeholders, right? So, because they're working with many different stakeholders, each stakeholder may think that their own requirements are the most important requirements, but a product owner has to make that call on whose requirements are most important for the project. So some stakeholder may not be happy if their requirements are not considered high up in the product backlog, and that may become a result of conflict. So it can happen among stakeholders. Conflicts can exist among stakeholders. Conflicts can exist between the product owner and stakeholders. And at the team level, conflicts can also exist in terms of which activity should be done first, which activity should be done second or last, and so on and so forth. So prioritization related to tasks or features, that could also be a reason for conflict. And then finally, there are schedules, right? So it says any disagreements they may develop around timing, sequencing, and scheduling of project related tasks. So that would be also a reason for conflict. So these are the common sources. So at least for the exam, you should have an understanding of all these different sources of conflict. Okay, now when we talk about schedules, just a quick note. So this could also be about when an activity should be done, right? So the difference between priorities and schedules is that schedules is a lot about when a specific activity should be done, and priority is also about when it should be done, but it is about how important or how less important is that particular activity. Okay, so these are the sources of conflict. So now that we understand what is conflict, what is good conflict, bad conflict, what is warranted and unwarranted conflict, and where does this conflict come from, let's look at one of the models, which helps us understand how do we deal with conflict. This is a very popular model. It's called the Thomas-Kilmann conflict mode. It basically helps you understand where you are when a conflict is actually happening, what kind of a strategy you're adopting, what kind of a person you are, and what kind of a person what kind of strategy the other person is adopting when it comes to conflict management. Okay, so in this Thomas-Kilmann conflict mode, there are basically 5 strategies. So there is avoiding, there is competing, there is collaborating, there is accommodating, and then there is compromising. So let's look at each of them. So when you see this particular table, it also shows you what type of a resolution that particular strategy is. So avoiding is, for example, a lose-lose type of a resolution. Competing is a win-lose type of a resolution. Collaborating is a win-win resolution. Accommodating is a win-lose resolution, and compromising is a lose-lose type of resolution. So this will help you understand, the different people who are there in your project and what kind of conflict modes that they are in. So let's look at avoiding. So generally, whenever a conflict happens, sometimes you may choose to withdraw or you may choose to totally avoid the conflict. And the reason why you may want to do that is because you probably believe that harmony is better than having any kind of frustration or aggression in the team. So you try to evade the conflict as much as possible. But in reality, you should be confronting the person and you should be resolving the conflict, because if you don't, it is going to be there, right? It is always going to lurk around in the background. So it is generally not a good idea to avoid a conflict. There are certain situations why you may avoid a conflict. For example, if you value the relationship with the other person, then you may choose to avoid the conflict. You may just choose to remain silent, right? It could be because the person is senior in the organization, or the person has more power in the organization, or maybe you just value the relationship a lot and you don't want to get into a conflict with the person. Next is being competitive. So competitive is, like the word suggests, you are in compete mode. So you want to win the argument. You want to prove that you are smarter, you are better, you are more knowledgeable, XYZ, right? So you are going to use force to make team members conform to one perspective. This could also be because you are higher up in the organization, you have power over the team. So you are making other people bend to your wishes and the way you want things to be done. So this strategy is normally useful when the team is new, right? Or when you are in a situation where you need to make very, very quick decisions. Like you don't have a lot of time to mull or debate over what would be the best way to solve a particular problem, right? So this is compete mode. Normally in this mode, you are winning and the other party is losing. Next is collaboration. So collaboration is the mode that you want to be in, right? Pretty much as much as possible, but it may not be possible at all times. Now, when you're collaborating, you are solving problems together. So you are coming together as a team. You're taking into account each other's perspective. You're agreeing that you have a shared goal, right? Like the way an agile team has a shared goal. So you're agreeing that you have a shared goal. You know that there is joint benefits that is going to be brought to both parties. There is also inclusion of several diverse views. So there are multiple team members, you're bringing in everyone's views, and then you are coming up with a solution. So this is the ideal mode that you want to be in. This is a mode in which you basically respect the other person, right? You just don't want to win, or you don't want to avoid something, right? And you're trying to meet the needs of everyone who is involved in the project. Sometimes you may also need to convince another person to see things from your perspective as well. So this is collaborating, which is a win-win situation. Next is accommodating or accommodator, right? So like it says, accommodator conveys that the other party is accepted as effective and avoids blaming, trading insults, not assertive, but highly cooperative. So accommodating, you can think of it, it's the opposite of competing. So in compete mode, you want to win. In accommodating, you are losing because for whatever reason, you want to let the other party win, right? So here, you're not being assertive, you're being very cooperative. You're letting the other person have their own way or do things the way they want to. And then finally, you have compromise. So compromise is when both parties win some, lose some, right? In reality, there is some loss that is happening to both parties. So it is actually a lose-lose type of a situation where both parties are not able to come to, and they're able to come to an agreement, but they are not able to come to an agreement which satisfies both parties entirely. There is some level of dissatisfaction that would be involved in a compromise type of situation. Right. So this is called the Thomas-Kilmann conflict mode. And this, understanding this mode, like in the exam, you will get questions from this mode as well, right? You may get questions from this mode. So knowing this is going to be useful, especially when it comes to certain situational questions and they ask you what is happening in the project, whether they are avoiding, competing, collaborating, accommodating, compromising. You will be able to choose the correct answer based on this understanding. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions on the concepts that I've discussed? Yes, Hari, that's a very good question. So does conflict management resolution need to be viewed with the larger business interest in mind? 100%, right? At the end of the day, whenever we are taking any decision, right, we have to take into consideration what are the larger business interests in mind. And sometimes, you may make decisions which other people may not be happy about, but, as long as you are collaborating with them and you're helping them understand what problem it is solving, how is it going to help the organization or their position in the organization, then I think people would be more open to accepting what you're saying. So Barbara, the reason why they've shown here, compromising as lose-lose, you can also put it in win-win. It depends to the extent of compromise, but there is definitely something that you're losing. It's not 100% win-win situation. It is not 100% win-win situation. It is a mix of win-win and lose-lose. And I think for the purposes of convenience, and the fact that in compromise, there is something that you're losing, they have put it in a lose-lose category rather than in a win-win category. Does that make sense? Raghu, sorry, Hari, does that answer your question? Okay, great. Now let's talk about another very critical and important concept. You will see a lot of questions actually in the exam on this. This is about managing conflict in virtual teams, right? So now the PMP exam also tests you on virtual teams, and you understand that we live in a world where we are working with people in a virtual environment, and pretty much every project that you can think of, at least whenever I talk to people from the IT field, they're working across the globe. They're working from people from Europe. They're working with people from India, from Philippines, from Australia, from wherever, you're always working with people from different parts of the world. So one of the major challenges of a virtual team is that there is no direct contact. Like you don't have the person physically present in front of you. So you cannot see, although you may be on video as well, but you may not be able to see every or understand everything that person is going through, or you may miss the context of many things when you're in a virtual environment, right? And these days, more than 50% of project team members are in a virtual environment. So if you see, it says virtual project consists of more than 50% of the project team members not being resident in the same physical location. So this is the definition of a virtual project team, that if more than 50% of the project team members are not in the same physical location, right, then that would be considered a virtual team, right? But even if you have, I would say 15% or 20% of the people in another part of the world, it is still a virtual team. And the reason is because even they need to be involved in the project. They need to be they need to feel connected to the project, because they could be important contributors to the project as well, right? So when we talk about virtual teams, there are a couple of things that also we should take into consideration. So when we are in a virtual team environment, there is lack of visual cues, right? There could be some cultural biases. So for example, if I'm working with someone from another part of the world, and I've never met that person, I may have some of my own cultural leanings and some of my own cultural understandings of how that person would be, because that person is from that part of the world, right? I could be right, I could be wrong, I could be misconstruing something that they say. Many things could happen. Plus, when you're in a virtual environment, you're normally chatting or you're sending an email, and because you don't necessarily hear the tone of voice of the other person, you may interpret something that is written very casually in a very offensive manner. So these are some challenges that can occur when you are in a virtual environment. Plus, when you are in a virtual environment, if there is excessive internal competition, that tends to erode trust amongst team members, and it also increases the chances of having a conflict amongst team members. So these are some general issues with a virtual team. Now let's see, how does a project manager, or how can a project manager solve conflicts that happen in a virtual environment, right? So this slide that I have created is actually created from some material that I picked up from the PMI website. And what PMI, that article that I referred to, basically that article talks about a research that was done, where virtual teams were studied. And from the research, it was concluded, what do successful virtual project managers do? Like, what are the major traits or the things that they invest their time in if they are a virtual project manager? So a lot of us who are going to work as project managers, or who are already currently working as project managers, are working in a virtual environment, and we have teams that we need to manage as well, right? So the first success criteria, or one of the first things that a virtual PM should do, is that they should try to gain support of stakeholders, which means as a virtual PM, you need to create a stakeholder matrix. Now, in a stakeholder matrix, you are normally going to record, what the stakeholders' influences, what their interest is, what their desires are, how much they are involved in the project, what power do they have in the project, and so on and so forth. So when you create a stakeholder engagement matrix, right, you have a good understanding of the different stakeholders who are there on your project team, even if they are halfway across the world. When you have that understanding of what the person's interest, influence, power is, you will be able to make better decisions related to that stakeholder, and you will be able to identify appropriate strategies to engage with that stakeholder. So in a nutshell, you need to ensure that as a virtual PM, you are able to get support of your stakeholders, right? Wherever they are in the world. Next is, a successful virtual PM will have an experience with dealing with cross-cultural teams, right? So these PMs will invest the time and the effort to get to know their team members. They would try to understand their culture, They will try to understand where they are coming from. They are going to help develop and transition team members. They are going to ensure that organizational processes are adapted to meet the team's needs. Basically, they are going to provide whatever support is required to the team so that the team is able to cope being in a virtual environment, right? And then it also goes on to say that it allows leadership to transition, ensuring that team received appropriate training for virtual communication. So if you're using a virtual tool, for instance, right, you need to train the team on it. Especially if you're using a very complex collaboration tool, you need to ensure that the team is properly trained on that tool. Next is establishing high expectations. So, I'm actually going like this. So I'm going from the top to the bottom, then to the right, and then I'll go back to the top again. So established high expectations. So basically in a virtual environment, we know that there is going to be communication challenges. So as a project manager, you need to establish metrics that measure team performance. And generally these metrics should have high expectations. Like they should be high expectation metrics. And the reason for that is because there are going to be so many communication challenges. If you don't set high expectations, those challenges of communication are going to remain. So to overcome those communication challenges, you normally want to have, any kind of metric, which, for example, you may want people to be on video, when you're doing a virtual meeting. You don't want people to just be on audio, right? Because when you are on video, you know that the other person is definitely more engaged than the person is on audio, because if the person is on audio, the person could be doing something else and may not necessarily be engaged in the meeting that's being running. Okay. Next is technology should be consistent and available to all virtual team members. So what they're basically saying is that any type of virtual communication technology that you use, whether it's a collaboration tool, whether it's a communication tool like a Slack, like a Jira tool, any tool that you can pretty much think of, right? If you're using a collaboration tool, it should be consistent. Like team A should not be using a different tool in comparison to what team B is using. And I've seen this in many companies. And when I teach classes, I see that, they tell us that to do the same job, there are 10 different teams using 10 different tools. There should be consistency of tools, and it should be made available to all virtual team members. Even if the tool is not very fancy, it is not state of the art, as long as it is consistent, it is available, and everyone is trained on it, it is good enough. Okay, so these are the 4 key points. And for the exam, when you get questions on virtual PMs and how they manage teams, just kind of keep this at the back of your head, that these are some answers that you should look for when you see the multiple choice question. Okay, so that is about virtual teams. Now, just give me 1 second. Now the next concept that we will talk about is going to be on okay, let's first talk about the the tuckmans 5 stages of group development, and then we will go back to the previous slide. So I've skipped a slide, but we'll go back to it. And the reason why I want to talk about the tuckmans ladder is primarily because the tuckmans ladder will also help you resolve any kind of conflict that may arise in a virtual team, right? Or in an agile team, right? So whether it's an agile team or a physically located team or a virtual team, this model will be applicable for pretty much all sorts of teams, right? So this tuckmans ladder of group development, it helps you understand what are the different stages that a team goes through, once the team is formed. So the 5 stages are forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And this is, very, very popular in the PMP exam. You will definitely see at least 1 question from this in the exam, right? So let's go through each of these stages. So let's go look at the forming stage. So the forming stage basically means the stage at which the team is getting formed. So because the team is getting formed, the team members are kind of just trying to get to know each other. They are a little uncertain about what their role is in the team. They're trying to find their feet in the team. They are uncertain about their roles and responsibilities. So obviously at this stage, there could be some reservation amongst team members, and there could also be some conflict that could happen during the forming phase, because people don't really know each other, right? People don't know how the other person is. So there could be some conflict at the forming stage. Once the team is formed, right, and the team has spent some time together, right, then the next stage is storming. So storming is the stage where I would say maximum conflict actually happens amongst team members. So so in the storming stage, what would typically happen is that the members of the group are trying to understand the hierarchy in the team. They are trying to understand who has how much experience in the team, right? They are trying to understand who is going to be the leader in the team. People may try to compete with each other. Think of a team where you have 4 or 5 different people, and in that same team you have a senior developer who has maybe 8 to 10 years of experience, and you have a junior developer, or maybe someone who just has 3 to 4 years of experience, and then you have some other people in the team, like you may have a business analyst in the team, or you may have someone from another department in the team. Now these people may also have a certain number of years of experience, and there is a possibility that because these people have different personalities, right, and they have different ways of thinking about the project, they have different they come from different technical backgrounds, they may have their own way of thinking, and there could be a conflict because of that, right? So this is called the storming stage, and the most likely stages for conflict is the forming and the storming stage. Next is the norming stage, right? So let's talk about that. So when we are in norming, it says the group becomes a more cohesive entity and members understand each other's roles, and individuals have also understood their roles within the group. So basically norming is a stage where things are starting to becoming a little smooth. So people now understand each other's personalities, right? They know how someone is going to probably behave in a specific situation. They are a little more warm towards each other. They are more friendly towards each other. They are more understanding towards each other, right? And they kind of want to collaborate, and or they're getting closer to collaboration, and they don't want to get into unnecessary fights and arguments. So that's norming. And then there is performing, where the team has truly reached a stage of trust. So there is a high level of trust in the team, right? People really know that if I'm not there, or if I'm struggling, my partner or my other team member is going to have my back. So they really begin to work very efficiently with each other. This you can think of this like an army battalion, or you can think of people who have been working with each other for a very long time, and they really understand each other well, and they're very comfortable working with each other. And then finally you have adjourning, where once the project is over, the team is disbanded and they move on and they join other projects, or they go back to regular business operations. So this model has been proven to be helpful whether you are in a virtual environment or even in a physical environment. So once you understand what the 5 stages of group development are, you are better able to see where the group is and what are the strategies you need to adapt to be able to get the group to become a more cohesive set of people. So you as a project manager would also not be faced with unnecessary surprises. Like if you don't understand this model, you may be thinking why people are fighting, but you need to realize what stage of group development they are in. Some fight is inevitable. It will happen, right? So it just helps you manage the team better. Okay, now let's talk about the next concept, which is called the 5 levels of team conflict, right? So whenever a team is put together, right, or when they come together, there are 5 levels of conflict. It's not necessary that you are going to reach these 5 levels, but when a conflict starts escalating, right, it can escalate up to level 5, right? So we are going to look at each of the levels. So let's look at level 1, which says problem to solve. So basically, problem to solve is a level where people are ready to solve problems, right? They are ready to collaborate. They're ready to listen to each other. They may have disagreements, but they are still ready to listen to each other. So information is freely shared. Collaboration is happening amongst people. And if you look at the statements under problem to solve, it says, all right, I hear you, but I think you're forgetting the fact that. Then another could be, did we just have a misunderstanding? What are you thinking I'm saying? So, maybe the other person misinterpreted something in a wrong way and you're trying to just clarify that. So, like I said, people are more open to talk about things and solve the problem, right? They are not becoming defensive here, so this is not a point where people are becoming using self-protection techniques or being defensive. Next is disagreement. So disagreement is, where people start thinking about the problem, but they also start thinking about their self-interest. They kind of, want to protect themselves as well. So people aren't hostile, but they are just wary of each other. They just want to be careful about what they say and how they say it so that they don't land in trouble. So it says self-protection becomes as important as problem solving. So let's look at, what are the different statements. So it says, you knew the support team didn't come through. Why didn't you tell us? You're doing the same thing you did last time that did not work. So this is disagreement. Okay. Next is contest. So contest is where your language becomes a little more harsh, right? Now, basically what happens is here, you start getting into factions. So you take one side and the other person takes another side, right? Very typical of political debates, right? Where you think the other side is wrong and the other side thinks that you are wrong, right? And what happens is that the real issues get lost and you are only focused on trivialities and you're kind of focused on, the other person rather than on the actual issue at hand, right? So you start doing overgeneralizations. People begin to align themselves to one side. So let's look at what are some of the statements. It says, if only she weren't on the team, either it's her or it's me, right? So now you're putting the other person in a difficult position. You're saying, make a choice. It's them or us. I don't even know what we are talking about anymore. We just don't get along, right? So you've reached a deadlock, basically. You kind of don't want to even talk about anything. So that's contest. Then there is crusade, right? So crusade is when you reach a point that you just feel that the other person is just plain wrong, right? You think the other person is incapable of changing. You don't even want to change the other person. What you're trying to do is you just want to get more people on your side so that you can have the majority. So it says language becomes more ideological. It says they'll never change. They're wrong, plain and simple. We need more people on our side. And then level 5 is World War, where you are ready to, do whatever it takes to win an argument, right? So you want to win and you want to ensure that you insult the other person, that the other person loses. Basically the other person feels really insulted, right? You really are being very acrimonious when you are in a World War type of a situation, right? So that is level number 5. So very interesting model, I would say, and important for your PMP exam. So definitely go through this for the test.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel to see more videos from us. And please give this video a like. Also check out other videos from our playlist that would be beneficial for your PMP exam preparation. Good luck with your PMP exam.